The morning of September 19th, 1944, a dense fog shrouds the rolling farmland outside Arracourt, France. Oberführer Hans Körner stands in the commander's cupola of his Panther Osif G, straining to see through the grey murk that has reduced visibility to perhaps 50 meters. His orders are simple: push forward, exploit the gap in Patton's extended lines, destroy the American tank destroyer battalion that intelligence reports is somewhere ahead in this soup. Körner has been fighting in Panthers for 8 months now, since the spring battles in Ukraine. He knows his tank, 45 tons of sloped armor, and a 75mm gun that can punch through a Sherman's frontal plate at 2,000 meters. The Panther is faster than the old Panzer IVs. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Capable of 55 kilometers per hour on good roads, though mechanical issues often limit actual speeds to 40 or less. Still, it's a formidable machine, the best medium tank in the world, or so Körner has been told. What Körner doesn't know, what none of the German tankers in the 113th Panzer Brigade know as they advance through the fog, is that they're about to encounter something that will fundamentally challenge every assumption they hold about armoured warfare. Not a heavier gun, not thicker armour. Raw, sustained, tactical speed that will make their Panthers feel like they're standing still. The sound comes first, a high-pitched mechanical scream, different from the deep rumble of a Panther's Maybach engine. Körner's gunner calls out movement at 10 o'clock. Through a brief gap in the fog, Körner glimpses something low and fast, painted olive drab, moving at what seems an impossible speed across the open ground. Before he can train his turret, it's gone, vanished into another patch of fog. Then the first 76mm round impacts the lead Panther 20 meters ahead. The shell strikes the turret ring, the weakest point in the Panther's armor. Scheme. The tank brews up instantly, ammunition cooking off in a series of violent secondary explosions. Körner's driver instinctively reverses, seeking cover, but the Panther's transmission, always temperamental, grinds in protest. Maximum reverse speed, 4 kilometers per hour, a walking pace. Another American tank destroyer appears, this time at 2 o'clock, perhaps 300 meters distant. Körner's gunner is fast, well-trained. The Panther's turret begins its traverse, hydraulics whining. 18 seconds for a full 360 rotation at maximum engine RPM. But 18 seconds might as well be 18 minutes. The American fires. The round penetrates the Panther's side armor, 40 millimeters thick, angled but not thick enough. Körner's tank shudders. His loader is dead. His gunner is screaming. Körner bails out, dropping through the escape hatch as smoke fills the fighting compartment. He hits the muddy ground and scrambles for a depression in the earth. From this position, crouched in cold French mud, he watches the American tank destroyers hunt. They move like nothing he's ever seen. One moment visible, firing. The next moment gone, repositioning at speeds that seem to violate the laws of physics for tracked vehicles. His training, his doctrine, his entire understanding of how tank combat works, all of it is being rewritten in front of his eyes by a machine he didn't know existed. The battle lasts less than an hour. By the time the fog lifts, 15 Panthers from the 113th Panzer Brigade are burning hulks scattered across the French countryside. The American losses total 2 tank destroyers. German survivors, Körner among them, will spend the next several days in Allied prisoner-of-war cages, trying to explain to skeptical intelligence officers that the American machines weren't tanks at all, but something faster, something they'd never trained to fight. June 1943. Flint, Michigan. The Buick Motor Division's tank arsenal operates around the clock. On the production floor, workers assemble the first production models of the T-70 gun motor carriage, soon to be standardized as the M18. The design philosophy behind this machine represents a radical departure from traditional American tank destroyer development, where previous designs like the M10 Wolverine used modified Sherman tank chassis, prioritizing reliability and adequate protection. The M18 embodies a single obsessive principle: speed as survival. Major General Andrew Bruce, commander of the Tank Destroyer Center at Camp Hood, Texas, drives this philosophy with religious fervor. Bruce studied the German blitzkrieg campaigns in Poland and France. He analyzed after-action reports from North Africa, where American tank destroyers arrived too late to intercept German armor breakthroughs. His conclusion, heretical to traditional armor doctrine, holds that the best defense against a tank is not thicker armor, but the ability to be somewhere else when the enemy fires. The M18 specifications reflect this philosophy in every design choice. 20 tons, unladen weight, less than half the weight of a Sherman tank, armor protection minimal, just half an inch on the front glacis, quarter inch on the sides. Thickness that will stop rifle fire and shell fragments, but nothing larger. The open-topped turret leaves the crew exposed to artillery and snipers. Every design choice sacrifices protection for one goal: speed. The engine is a Continental R975, a 9-cylinder radial borrowed from aviation applications. 400 horsepower driving 17 tons through a hydromatic automatic transmission with 3 forward gears. The power-to-weight ratio exceeds 23 horsepower per ton, nearly double that of a Sherman, superior even to the German Panther. On the Buick test track, engineers clock the M18 at 55 miles per hour on roads, maintaining 35 to 40 miles per hour cross-country over rough terrain, the fastest tracked armored vehicle in the world. But speed alone doesn't win battles. The M18 mounts a 76mm M1A1 gun, the same weapon being fitted to upgunned Sherman variants. High velocity. Muzzle velocity of 2,600 feet per second, with standard armor-piercing ammunition. Penetration values of 92mm of armor at 1,000 yards at 30 degrees obliquity, enough to defeat a Panther's side armor, insufficient against frontal plates. The turret, designed by Harley Earl's styling team at Buick, features a full 360-degree traverse powered by electric motors. Rotation speed, 60 degrees per second, 3 times faster than a Panther's hydraulic system. A Hellcat crew can identify a target, traverse, fire, and be moving again before a German tank commander completes his turret rotation. Production accelerates through summer and fall of 1943. Buick initially receives contracts for 8,986 vehicles, but Army Ground Forces cuts this to 2,507 as the M36, with its 90mm gun, receives production priority. The Hellcat, Tank Destroyer Command argues, lacks the firepower to reliably kill Panthers and Tigers from the front. The debate reveals fundamental disagreements about armored warfare doctrine that will persist throughout the war. By March 1944, when the Ordnance Department officially standardizes the design as the M18 Hellcat, the first units are already deploying to Europe. The 634th Tank Destroyer Battalion receives their Hellcats in May. The 704th and 705th Battalions follow in June and July. These units arrive in France carrying Field Manual 18-5, the Tank Destroyer Bible, which emphasizes aggressive action, rapid deployment to threatened sectors, and massed firepower against enemy armor concentrations. The doctrine makes sense on paper. In practice, it assumes German armor will operate the way it did in France in 1940, massing for breakthrough operations that American tank destroyer battalions can intercept and destroy. But in Normandy in June 1944, German panzer tactics have evolved. Armor operates in small battle groups, supporting infantry defensively, launching local counterattacks rather than massed offensives. The Grand Tank Destroyer battles envisioned by Field Manual 18-5 don't materialize. Instead, Hellcat battalions find themselves parceled out to infantry divisions, providing direct fire support against fortified positions, blasting bunkers and pillboxes, missions they were never designed for. The crews adapt, learning their vehicle's capabilities and limitations through trial and error. The speed that was supposed to be their primary survival mechanism remains largely unused. Narrow Norman bocage hedgerows don't permit high-speed maneuvering. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The Hellcat's thin armor becomes a deadly liability in close-quarters combat. Then comes September 19th, 1944, the Battle of Arracourt, the moment when doctrine, design, and tactical reality finally align, the moment when German panzer crews discover what it feels like to fight an enemy that can outrun, outflank, and outmaneuver everything they thought they knew about armoured combat, the Lorraine region of eastern France. Early September 1944. General George S. Patton's Third Army has advanced further and faster than any Allied force since D-Day, driving through France in a campaign that resembles the German blitzkrieg of 1940 more than the grinding attrition of Normandy. But Patton's supply lines are overstretched. His tanks are running low on fuel, his infantry divisions are spread thin, and German intelligence knows it. Field Marshal Walther Model, commanding German forces in the West, seized an opportunity. The First German Army, reinforced with fresh panzer brigades withdrawn from the Eastern Front, will launch a major counter-offensive. The objective is to cut off Patton's spearheads, destroy the overextended American armoured divisions, and restore a stable defensive line along the Moselle River. The operation centres on Arracourt, a small town where American armour is concentrated in relatively small numbers. The German force includes elements of the 5th Panzer Army, the 113th Panzer Brigade equipped with 43 Panthers and Panzer IV tanks, supported by Panzer Grenadier infantry and self-propelled guns. German commanders believe they have local superiority. Intelligence reports indicate the Americans have only light forces in the sector, primarily reconnaissance elements, and a single tank destroyer battalion. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with M18 Hellcats, Company C of the 704th, under Captain Tom Evans, occupies defensive positions around Arracourt on the morning of September 19th. The fog that rolls in before dawn reduces visibility to knife-fighting range. Evans positions his 3 platoons in a loose semicircle, covering the likely German approach routes. Each M18 carries 45 rounds of 76mm ammunition, a mix of armour-piercing and high-explosive shells. The crews have been in combat for 6 weeks. They know their vehicles. They've learned the hard way that frontal engagements with German heavy tanks are suicide. Their doctrine now emphasises flanking shots, side and rear armour, where their 76mm gun can penetrate. The German attack begins at 0630 hours. Panthers and Panzer IVs advance through the fog, in a formation that assumes they'll encounter Sherman tanks in defensive positions. Standard doctrine: fight frontally, use superior armour and firepower to break through. What the Germans don't account for is that Hellcats don't fight like Shermans. They don't hold defensive positions, they hunt. The first German tanks emerge from the fog at 300 metres range. Evans's lead platoon, dug in behind a low stone wall, holds fire. Discipline. Wait for the flank. The Panthers continue forward, turrets traversing slowly, searching for targets they can't see in the fog. They're moving at perhaps 10 kilometers per hour, cautious, expecting ambush but not from multiple directions. Evans gives the order. The lead platoon opens fire. 3 Hellcats, 3 Panthers, 2 hits, 2 kills. The third Panther, struck but not penetrated, attempts to rotate its turret toward the threat. 18 seconds for a full traverse at combat speed. The Hellcat that fired is already moving, engine screaming, tracks tearing up French soil, accelerating to 40 miles per hour within seconds. By the time the Panther completes its traverse, the Hellcat is gone, repositioned 300 meters to the south. The surviving German tanks attempt to pursue, but pursuit requires knowing where the enemy went. The fog conceals everything beyond 50 meters. Panthers advance cautiously, expecting the Americans to be where doctrine says they should be, in prepared positions, fighting defensively. Instead, the Hellcats are everywhere and nowhere, moving at speeds German tankers have never encountered, appearing, firing, vanishing. The second German assault wave arrives at 0700 hours. Company C of the 704th has already knocked out 7 Panthers. Captain Evans repositions his platoons again, using the Hellcat's speed to create the illusion of a much larger force. German commanders, receiving reports of American tank destroyers appearing simultaneously at multiple locations across a 2-kilometer front, conclude they're facing at least 2 full battalions. They're facing 14 vehicles. Lieutenant Edwin Leiper commands the 2nd platoon. His Hellcat, nicknamed Beaver, has already claimed 2 kills this morning. Through his periscope, Leiper watches a Panther advance past his position, the German commander scanning for threats to his front and flanks. The Panther's turret traverse is slow, methodical. German training emphasizes presenting frontal armor to the enemy. Excellent doctrine when fighting Shermans that must close to 500 meters for a reliable kill. Suicidal against an enemy that can flank at 50 miles per hour. Leiper's gunner, Sergeant James Wilson, has the Panther's side armor perfectly profiled at 280 meters. The turret ring, where the rotating turret meets the hull, offers minimal protection. Wilson fires. The round penetrates. The Panther stops, smoke pouring from hatches. Leiper's driver already has the Hellcat moving before the German crew can bail out. 30 seconds later, they're 400 meters away, approaching another Panther from its blind spot. The battle develops into a pattern that will repeat throughout the day. German tanks advance in formation, expecting to encounter American armor in predictable defensive positions. Instead, they find themselves attacked from unexpected angles by an enemy that refuses to stay in one place. The Hellcat's speed transforms every engagement, where a Sherman must commit to a firing position and hold it, accepting return fire. The Hellcat fires and relocates before the German gunner can respond. German tank commanders later describe the experience as fighting ghosts. One moment, muzzle flash in the fog, the next moment, nothing. Then fire from a completely different direction. The psychological effect compounds the tactical advantage. German crews become cautious, hesitant, scanning constantly for threats that could appear from any angle. Reaction time increases. Accuracy decreases. The initiative, that intangible but critical advantage in combat, belongs entirely to the Americans. By 0900 hours, the fog begins to lift. Captain Evans repositions his company for the 3rd time this morning. The improved visibility should favor the Germans, allowing them to spot and engage Hellcats at range. Instead, it reveals the full scope of the disaster developing around Arracourt. 19 German tanks are burning across the battlefield. More are damaged. Crews dead or wounded inside vehicles immobilized by hits to tracks or running gear. The German brigade commander, viewing the carnage from his command vehicle, makes a decision. Withdraw. Regroup. This assault has failed. But withdrawing under fire from an enemy that moves at 50 miles per hour presents problems traditional doctrine doesn't address. Panthers attempting to reverse find their maximum reverse speed of 4 kilometers per hour leaves them vulnerable for extended periods. Several tanks attempting to withdraw are hit from behind, the Hellcats pursuing like predators running down fleeing prey. Sergeant Henry Hartmann, commanding an M18 in the 3rd platoon, personally destroys 6 German tanks during the pursuit phase. His tactic, refined through morning combat, involves approaching from the rear quarter at 40 miles per hour, closing to 300 meters, firing into engine compartments or rear turret armor, then accelerating away before German escorts can respond. The Panther's turret traverse speed cannot match a target moving at modern highway speeds perpendicular to the line of fire. Basic geometry and physics combine to create an engagement scenario German training never anticipated. By 1300 hours, the Battle of Arracourt's first phase concludes. Company C of the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion has destroyed 39 German tanks, damaged dozens more, and disrupted a brigade-sized attack. American losses total 4 M18s destroyed, 3 damaged but repairable. The kill ratio, nearly 10-1, represents one of the most lopsided armored engagements of the entire war. Tactical analysis, studied by both sides in subsequent weeks, identifies speed as the decisive factor. But Arracourt is just the beginning. Over the next week, German forces launch repeated counterattacks attempting to drive Patton's forces back across the Moselle. Each attack encounters the same problem. American tank destroyer battalions, equipped with Hellcats, exploiting speed and mobility to achieve local superiority against numerically larger German formations. The Germans adapt, attempting to counter the Hellcats' speed advantage with tactics borrowed from their Eastern Front experience fighting Soviet light tanks. None of them work. The fundamental issue German commanders face is that Soviet light tanks, while fast, carry inadequate firepower. A T-70's 45mm gun cannot reliably penetrate a Panther from any angle. The Hellcat's 76mm gun, while insufficient against frontal armor, devastates side and rear plates. Speed allows the Hellcat to choose engagement angles. The combination of tactical mobility and adequate firepower creates a capability German armor doctrine has no effective counter for. Obergefreiter Klaus Becker, driver of a Panther Ausf A in the 5th Panzer Army, survives 3 separate engagements with Hellcats during the Arracourt fighting. His written account, recovered from German military archives after the war, describes the experience from the tanker's perspective. Becker notes that his Panther could theoretically match the Hellcat's road speed on paper, 55 km per hour maximum for the Panther, 97 km per hour for the Hellcat. But theoretical maximum speed and combat sustainable speed are vastly different metrics. The Panther's Maybach HL230 engine produces 690 horsepower, impressive for 1944, but the transmission, the ZF AK7 200 gearbox, suffers from chronic reliability problems. The final drives, designed for a 30-ton vehicle but installed in a 45-ton tank, fail frequently. German field mechanics joke darkly that Panthers spend more time awaiting transmission replacement than engaging the enemy. The reality, documented in unit maintenance logs, shows that average operational availability for Panther battalions in France during September 1944 hovers around 40%. For every 10 Panthers a unit possesses on paper, only 4 are combat-ready at any given time. Even when mechanically sound, the Panther cannot sustain high-speed maneuvering under combat conditions. The interleaved road wheel suspension, while providing excellent cross-country performance, accumulates mud and debris. In wet conditions, common in fall in France, the wheels jam. Crews must halt and manually clear the suspension, a process requiring 30 minutes and exposing the vehicle to enemy fire. The Hellcat's simpler torsion bar suspension with 8 road wheels per side requires minimal maintenance and rarely jams. Fuel consumption presents another constraint. The Panther's specific fuel consumption at maximum engine speed reaches nearly 1 litre per kilometre. The tank carries 730 litres of fuel, providing a theoretical range of 250 kilometres on roads. In practice, combat manoeuvring, idling in ambush positions, and cold starting the temperamental engine reduce effective range to 150 kilometres or less. The Hellcat carries 630 litres of fuel but weighs half as much. Effective combat range exceeds 200 kilometres. These mechanical and logistical factors mean that while the Panther can theoretically reach 55 km per hour, combat units rarely sustain speeds above 30 km per hour for any extended period. The Americans, meanwhile, routinely operate Hellcats at 40 to 50 miles per hour, 64 to 80 km per hour, when tactical situations permit. The speed, differential, nearly 2 to 1 in practice, transforms every engagement. December 19th, 1944, the Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The German military launches Operation Watch on the Rhine. History will call it the Battle of the Bulge, a massive counter-offensive designed to split Allied forces and capture the vital port of Antwerp. 3 German armies, 29 divisions, attack through a lightly defended sector of the American line. The initial assaults achieve complete tactical surprise. American units fall back in confusion. The German advance, for the first 48 hours, resembles the Blitzkrieg campaigns of 1940. Then the weather clears enough for Allied tactical aircraft to operate, and American armored reserves, including tank destroyer battalions equipped with M18s, race north to contain the breakthrough. The terrain, dense forest cut by narrow roads and steep valleys, should favor German defenders. Instead, It becomes a killing ground for Hellcat crews who have spent 6 months learning their vehicle's capabilities. Team de Sobri, a battalion-sized task force from the 10th Armoured Division, receives orders to defend the village of Neuville, located northeast of Bastogne. The mission is straightforward. Hold Neuville long enough for the 101st Airborne Division to establish a defensive perimeter around Bastogne itself. The force consists of 1 tank company with Shermans, 1 armoured infantry company, and 4 M18s from the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion. 4 vehicles to hold against elements of the 2nd Panzer Division, one of the elite formations in the German army, equipped with Panthers, Panzer IVs, and supporting infantry. The German plan assumes the Americans will establish a static defence in Neuville. Standard doctrine: infantry dug in around the village, tanks in hull-down positions providing fire support. The Germans will fix the American force with infantry attacks. Then, flank with armour, classic combined arms tactics that have worked countless times on the Eastern Front. But the Hellcat crews don't fight defensively. Lieutenant Colonel James O'Hara, commanding the 4 M18s, positions his vehicles outside the village proper, in dispersed locations covering the approach roads. The crews understand they cannot trade armour for armour with Panthers. Their mission is disruption, delay, and inflicting maximum casualties while remaining mobile enough to survive. The German assault begins at 0500 hours on December 20th. Panthers advance up the main road from Bourcy, expecting to encounter American armour in predictable positions. Instead, the 1st Panther in column takes a 76mm round through the side armour at 400 metres range. The Hellcat that fired is moving before the German column can react, disappearing into pre-scouted positions 300 metres away. The German commander, experienced from 3 years on the Eastern Front, recognises the tactic. Light enemy forces, conducting a delaying action, standard response, deploy infantry to suppress the anti-tank guns, while armour advances to close with the main defensive positions. Except the American tank destroyers aren't in fixed positions. They're moving, constantly, using Neuville's surrounding terrain to appear, fire, and relocate faster than German doctrine can adapt to. Over the next 6 hours, the 4 Hellcats of the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion destroy or damage more than 20 German tanks. The tactic remains consistent: engage from unexpected angles at ranges between 200 and 500 metres. Fire. Relocate immediately. Never remain stationary longer than 2 minutes. The constant movement creates the impression of a much larger force. German commanders, receiving reports of American tank destroyers engaging from multiple sectors simultaneously, estimate they face at least 2 full battalions. Lieutenant Friedrich Weber, commanding a Panther in the 2nd Panzer Division, later describes the engagement in his memoir published in 1953. Weber notes that his crew destroyed 2 American Sherman tanks during the Neuville battle, both from frontal positions at ranges exceeding 800 metres. The Shermans, following standard doctrine, held defensive positions that allowed the German gunner to range them accurately. But the American tank destroyers, Weber writes, fought differently. They refused to present frontal profiles. They wouldn't remain stationary long enough for accurate ranging. His gunner would identify a target, begin the firing solution, and before the gun could be laid properly, the American vehicle had moved. Weber's Panther was eventually knocked out by a flanking shot that penetrated the rear turret armour. He never saw the American vehicle that destroyed his tank, only the muzzle flash, then the impact. The tactical innovation the Hellcat represents isn't merely speed. It's the combination of speed, adequate firepower, and a completely different approach to armoured combat. Traditional tank doctrine, developed by all major powers during the interwar period, emphasises armour protection and firepower. The tank is a mobile fortress, designed to advance under fire, weather enemy hits, and destroy opposing armour through superior gunnery and protection. The Hellcat rejects this paradigm entirely. It survives not by absorbing hits, but by not being present when the enemy fires. The thin armour, viewed as a fatal flaw by conventional tank commanders, becomes irrelevant when the vehicle moves too fast to target effectively. The doctrine, dismissed as suicidal by Army Ground Forces planners in 1943, proves devastatingly effective when crews learn to exploit mobility properly. German attempts to counter the Hellcat's speed advantage reveal the fundamental limitations of Panther design. The obvious response is to increase German tank speed, but the Panther's weight and mechanical complexity make this impractical. Reducing weight requires reducing armor, which defeats the Panther's primary advantage over Soviet tanks. Increasing engine power exacerbates transmission reliability problems. The Maybach HL-230 already operates at the limits of mechanical durability. Alternative approaches focus on improving turret traverse speed and crew training. The Panther's hydraulic turret traverse system, powered by the main engine, achieves up to 36 degrees per second at maximum engine RPM. This represents a significant improvement over earlier German tanks, but remains insufficient against targets moving at 60 miles per hour, perpendicular to the line of fire. The mathematics of deflection shooting become impossible when the target's angular velocity exceeds the turret's maximum traverse rate. German training begins emphasizing ambush tactics, allowing American tank destroyers to approach prepared positions before engaging. This works occasionally, particularly in defensive terrain like the Hurtgen forest where restricted mobility negates the Hellcat's speed advantage. But in open terrain, or during mobile operations like the Ardennes counteroffensive, prepared positions prove impossible to maintain. The front moves too quickly. American forces infiltrate too effectively. By January 1945, German tactical memoranda circulated at division level acknowledged the problem. The American M18 tank destroyer possesses speed characteristics that current German armor cannot match. Recommended tactics emphasize infantry anti-tank weapons, pre-positioned obstacles to channel American movement into engagement zones, and concentrated artillery fire to suppress or destroy American vehicles before they can exploit mobility. None of these recommendations address the fundamental issue. The Hellcat can move faster than German units can reposition. The post-war assessment, conducted by U.S. Army Ordnance Department researchers interviewing German tank commanders and analyzing combat records, identifies several key factors in the Hellcat's effectiveness. First, speed differential. The practical combat speed advantage of 30 to 40 km per hour allows Hellcat crews to dictate engagement terms. Second, turret traverse. The Hellcat's electrical traverse system, 60 degrees per second, permits rapid target acquisition against multiple threats. Third, crew training. By late 1944, Hellcat crews had refined tactics through months of combat experience. Fourth, and perhaps most significant, the psychological factor. German tank crews fighting Hellcats report higher stress levels, reduced engagement confidence, and increased caution compared to battles against Sherman tanks. The inability to reliably track and engage an enemy that appears, fires, and vanishes at highway speeds creates combat fatigue that accumulates over multiple engagements. German commanders note declining morale in panzer units that repeatedly encounter American tank destroyer battalions. The captured German document, recovered from 5th Panzer Army headquarters after the Battle of the Bulge, titled Tactical Assessment of American Tank Destroyers, provides remarkable insight into how German professionals viewed the Hellcat. The assessment, dated January 12, 1945, notes that American tank destroyer units employ fundamentally different tactics than tank battalions. The document specifically identifies the M18 as the most dangerous American armored vehicle despite its thin armor and moderate firepower. The assessment's author, believed to be a general staff officer with extensive Eastern Front experience, compares the Hellcat unfavorably to Soviet light tanks in terms of armor protection, but notes that American crews use speed more effectively than their Soviet counterparts. The document recommends avoiding engagement with M18s in open terrain, establishing ambush positions in urban areas or forests where American mobility is restricted, and prioritizing Hellcats as targets over more heavily armored Shermans when tactical situations permit. Most remarkably, the assessment acknowledges that German armor doctrine, optimized for the Eastern Front's vast distances and open terrain against Soviet mass attacks, proves inadequate against American combined arms tactics that emphasize mobility and flexibility. The implication, though never stated explicitly, is clear. The Germans designed their tanks to fight the wrong war, or perhaps more accurately, they designed excellent tanks for one kind of war and discovered too late that the Western Front required different solutions. The Battle of Arracourt and the Ardennes fighting represent the M18's finest moments, but they also reveal limitations that Army ground forces had warned about from the beginning. The 76mm gun, while adequate against Panther side armor and all models of Panzer IV, struggles against Tiger heavy tanks and is completely ineffective against the Tiger II that begins appearing in late 1944. The open-topped turret, excellent for crew visibility and rapid egress in emergencies, leaves crews vulnerable to artillery airbursts and small arms fire in urban combat. The thin armor, acceptable when the vehicle moves continuously, becomes a death trap in static defensive positions. Hellcat crews in the Hürtgen forest, fighting in dense woodland where speeds above 10 miles per hour are impossible, suffer disproportionate casualties. The vehicle designed for mobile warfare proves poorly suited to the grinding positional battles that characterize much of the campaign from Normandy to the Rhine. By March 1945, as American forces cross the Rhine and push into Germany proper, the M36 tank destroyer with its 90mm gun has largely replaced the Hellcat in frontline service. The M36 sacrifices some speed, maximum of 42 miles per hour versus the Hellcat's 55, but gains the firepower to reliably engage Tiger and Tiger II tanks from the front. Army ground forces, vindicated in their original assessment, accelerates M36 production and reassigns Hellcat battalions to secondary sectors or converts them to infantry support roles. But the combat record speaks for itself. Hellcat units claim 526 enemy armoured vehicles destroyed in combat, at a cost of 217. M18s lost to all causes. The kill ratio, approximately 2.4 to 1, compares favourably to other American tank destroyers and exceeds the Sherman tank's performance by significant margins. More importantly, in those engagements where Hellcat crews successfully employed mobility tactics, the kill ratios reach 5 to 1 or better. The lesson, documented in numerous after-action reports and tactical studies, is that speed can substitute for armor when combined with proper tactics and crew training. This represents a fundamental challenge to armor doctrine as understood in 1944. Every major power entering World War II believed that tanks required thick armor to survive. The Germans built Panthers and Tigers with frontal armor exceeding 100 millimeters. The Soviets developed the JS series with even thicker protection. The British designed the Churchill infantry tank with 152 millimeter frontal plates. The Americans, through the Hellcat program, accidentally discovered that at certain speeds, armor becomes less important than not being where the enemy aims. This insight, radical in 1944, would become foundational to post-war armoured vehicle design. The concept of the main battle tank, combining mobility, firepower, and moderate armour, owes its existence partly to lessons learned from the Hellcat's combat performance. Oberleutnant Hans Körner, the Panther commander from Arracourt who survived that fog-shrouded morning in September 1944, spent the remainder of the war in American prisoner camps. In 1947, after repatriation to Germany, he provided testimony to U.S. Army Historical Division researchers studying German perspectives on American equipment. Körner's assessment of the M18 is surprisingly professional and detailed. He notes that his crew's first encounter with Hellcats at Arracourt completely upended their tactical understanding. German training emphasized that American armor was defensively minded, that Sherman crews avoided risk, that tank destroyer doctrine called for prepared positions and long-range engagements. The Hellcats at Arracourt did none of these things. They attacked aggressively, close to deadly ranges where the German armor advantage became irrelevant, and moved with a speed that rendered standard German counter-tactics useless. Körner specifically mentions the psychological impact of fighting an enemy that moves too fast to track effectively. In his experience on the Eastern Front, Soviet tanks were numerous but predictable. They attacked in waves, absorbed casualties, and eventually overwhelmed German positions through attrition. Terrifying in its own way, but comprehensible. The American tank destroyers fought differently, surgical, precise, appearing at the worst possible moment from the worst possible angle. Most striking, Kerner admits that by late 1944, Panther crews in his battalion actively avoided engagement with identified American tank destroyer units when possible. Not from cowardice, he insists, but from tactical realism. A Panther dueling Shermans could reasonably expect to achieve 3 or 4 kills before being disabled. A Panther engaging Hellcats faced near certain destruction before achieving a single kill, unless the engagement occurred in terrain that negated the American speed advantage. The mathematics of survival dictated avoidance. This psychological dimension, the erosion of German tank crew morale when facing Hellcats, receives less attention in formal studies, but appears consistently in veteran testimonies. The Panther on paper remained superior to the Hellcat in almost every measurable category except speed. Superior armor, superior gun, superior optics, better crew comfort. Yet German crews increasingly preferred not to fight Hellcats if alternatives existed. The intangible advantages of speed and tactical flexibility proved more important than hardware specifications suggested. The technical comparison reveals why. A Panther OSFG in March 1945, representing the final production variant incorporating all combat-driven improvements, weighs 45,500 kilograms. Maximum speed on roads, 55 kilometers per hour, rarely achieved in practice due to transmission fragility and fuel consumption concerns. Turret traverse, 36 degrees per second at maximum engine RPM. Main gun penetration, 138 mm of armor at 1,000 meters with standard ammunition. Frontal armor, 80 mm effective thickness at 65 degrees slope, equivalent to approximately 150 mm of vertical armor. The M18 in the same period weighs 17,700 kilograms. Maximum speed on roads, 88 km per hour, routinely achieved during combat operations. Turret traverse, 60 degrees per second, independent of engine speed. Main gun penetration, 92 mm at 1,000 meters with standard ammunition, 110 mm with HVAP rounds when available. Frontal armor, 13 mm maximum thickness, proof against rifle caliber ammunition only. The specifications suggest the Panther should dominate any engagement, and in static, frontal duels at long range, it does. But combat rarely occurs under ideal conditions. The Hellcat's ability to choose engagement ranges, attack from unexpected angles, and disengage before German crews can respond, transforms every specification disadvantage into irrelevance. A gun that can penetrate 138 mm of armor means nothing if the target never presents its frontal plate. 80 mm of sloped armor provides zero protection against 76 mm rounds, striking the 40 mm side plates. Speed equalizes the equation. More than equalizes, it reverses it. The hunter becomes the hunted. The heavily armored fortress on tracks becomes a target, struggling to rotate fast enough to engage an enemy that appears, fires, and vanishes before the hydraulic traverse completes. The mathematical reality of deflection shooting, the need to lead a moving target, becomes impossible when the target moves at speeds the fire control system was never designed to accommodate. German engineers understood the problem. Post-war interrogations of Panzer Design Bureau personnel reveal that proposals for higher-speed medium tanks were discussed as early as mid-1944. The E-Series development program, initiated in 1943 to standardize and simplify German armor production, included designs for vehicles incorporating better power-to-weight ratios and improved mobility. None reached production before war's end. Germany's collapsing industrial base, strategic bombing, and acute material shortages made introducing new designs impossible. Even had Germany produced faster tanks, the fundamental challenge would have remained. Speed requires reliability. The German tank industry in 1944 produced sophisticated, complex machines requiring extensive maintenance and specialized spare parts. The Americans produced simpler vehicles designed for field maintenance with minimal tools. The Continental R975 engine in the Hellcat was literally the same engine used in Sherman tanks, already proven reliable through millions of operational hours. Crews could swap engines in the field within 4 hours using minimal equipment. Panther transmissions, by contrast, required specialized lifting equipment and factory-trained technicians. Field replacement took days when facilities existed at all. By late 1944, most German Panzer units lacked adequate maintenance support. Tanks awaiting transmission replacement were stripped for parts to keep other vehicles operational. The theoretical speed advantage German tanks might have achieved through better engineering became meaningless when the tanks spent more time immobilized than fighting. The Hellcat's greatest advantage, rarely discussed in technical comparisons, was that it actually worked as designed. American industrial philosophy emphasized reliability over performance optimization. The Continental engine was durable rather than powerful. The hydromatic transmission was simple rather than sophisticated. The suspension was conventional rather than innovative. Every component was designed to be maintained by averagely trained crews with standard tools. This practical approach meant Hellcat battalions consistently maintained operational readiness rates above 80% through sustained combat operations. German Panzer battalions, equipped with theoretically superior tanks, averaged 40 to 50% operational readiness in the same period. No amount of superior armor or firepower matters if half your tanks are deadlined awaiting parts or repairs. The American approach, building adequate vehicles in vast quantities with excellent logistical support, proved more effective than the German approach of building exceptional vehicles in limited numbers with inadequate support infrastructure. By April 1945, as American forces penetrate deep into Germany and the Reich's collapse becomes inevitable, remaining German Panzer units report that encountering American tank destroyer battalions has become their least preferred engagement scenario. Not facing Soviet heavy tank corps, not engaging British armored divisions, but fighting American tank destroyers equipped with Hellcats. The speed differential, combined with American tactical air superiority and artillery coordination, creates scenarios German doctrine has no effective response to. The final irony is that German tankers often faced Hellcats while their own tanks sat immobilized by lack of fuel. Operation Watch on the Rhine, the Ardennes offensive, failed partly because German spearheads couldn't capture American fuel dumps. Panther battalions, designed for deep penetration operations, found themselves conducting static defense because they lacked fuel for mobile warfare. American Hellcat battalions, with secure supply lines and abundant fuel, operated at will across the same terrain, exploiting the mobility their vehicles were designed for. A captured German training memorandum from March 1945, discovered in 2nd SS Panzer Corps headquarters near Remagen, provides the final word on German assessment of American tank destroyers. The document, intended for newly formed panzer battalions being rushed to the front with minimal training, warns specifically about American M18 vehicles. The memorandum notes that these vehicles will appear faster than trainee crews expect, will engage from unexpected angles, and will be gone before standard engagement procedures can be executed. The recommended response is telling. Do not attempt to pursue American tank destroyers. Do not expose your flanks attempting to track their movement. Remain in hull-down defensive positions and engage only when the Americans approach your prepared sectors. The advice represents complete abandonment of German mobile warfare doctrine. The memorandum essentially instructs crews to hide from Hellcats rather than fight them. This from the army that pioneered Blitzkrieg, that conquered most of Europe through aggressive armored warfare, that wrote the book on tank tactics. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.